Ed Gein's story begins in the quiet farming community of Plainfield, Wisconsin. This small town with its serene landscapes and close-knit community seemed like an idyllic place to grow up. However, beneath the surface of this tranquil setting, a much darker story was unfolding. Born in 1906, Ed and his brother Henry grew up in a household ruled by a domineering and religious mother, Augusta. Augusta was a woman of strong convictions, and she imposed her rigid beliefs on her family with an iron fist. Her influence was pervasive, shaping every aspect of their lives. Augusta Gein instilled a deep fear of sin and the outside world in her sons. She would often read passages from the Bible, emphasizing the wickedness of humanity and the dangers that lurked beyond their home. This constant barrage of fear and moral absolutism left a lasting impression on young Ed. Their father, George, was a weak and alcoholic man who provided little stability. George's inability to stand up to Augusta or provide a nurturing environment further compounded the dysfunction within the Gein household. His presence was more of a shadow, a reminder of the instability that plagued their family life. The Gein family lived in near isolation, rarely interacting with others in the community. Their farmhouse, surrounded by vast fields, became a fortress of solitude. The boys were cut off from the outside world, their lives revolving around the farm and their mother's strict rules. Augusta's strict religious beliefs and paranoia about the evils of the world kept her sons close. She believed that the world outside was filled with sin and corruption, and she was determined to shield her boys from its influence. This overprotectiveness stifled their social development and left them ill-prepared for life beyond the farm. She discouraged friendships and outside activities, believing them to be corrupting influences. The boys were not allowed to play with other children or participate in community events. Their lives were confined to the farm, their only companions being each other and their mother. Ed and Henry's world shrunk to the confines of their farm and their mother's oppressive presence. The isolation was suffocating, and the boys had little opportunity to experience the joys of childhood. Their days were filled with chores and the constant presence of their mother's watchful eye. School offered little respite for young Ed. While it was a brief escape from the farm, it was not a sanctuary. The rigid structure of the classroom mirrored the strict environment at home, and Ed found it difficult to fit in. He was a quiet and awkward boy, often bullied by his classmates. His odd behavior and the strange stories he told about his home life made him a target for ridicule. The other children sensed his vulnerability and took advantage of it, further isolating him. His peers found him strange, and he struggled to connect with them. The social skills that most children develop naturally were foreign to Ed. He was an outsider, both at home and at school, and this sense of alienation only deepened his dependence on his mother. His only solace was his brother, Henry. The bond between the two brothers was strong, forged in the crucible of their shared hardships. They relied on each other for companionship and support, finding comfort in their mutual understanding of their difficult circumstances. The two boys shared a bond forged in their shared isolation and difficult home life. They worked side by side on the farm, their labor a silent testament to their resilience. In the rare moments of leisure, they would play together, creating their own world within the confines of their isolation. Ed's childhood was far from idyllic. The constant fear, isolation, and lack of normal social interactions took a toll on his mental and emotional well-being. He was a child trapped in a world of darkness, with little hope of escape. He was trapped in a cycle of fear and isolation, dominated by a controlling mother and starved for normalcy. The oppressive environment stunted his emotional growth and left him ill-equipped to deal with the outside world. This tumultuous beginning cast a long shadow, setting the stage for the darkness that would later consume him. The seeds of his future actions were sown in the fertile ground of his troubled childhood, and the legacy of his early years would haunt him for the rest of his life. Ed Gein's isolated upbringing left him ill-equipped to navigate the complexities of human interaction. Deprived of social experiences, he struggled to form meaningful connections or develop a sense of belonging. The outside world remained a source of fear and confusion, reinforcing his isolation. Augusta Gein's constant pronouncements about sin and damnation warped her son's understanding of morality and sexuality. Her teachings instilled a deep sense of shame and repression, particularly regarding women. This unhealthy view of women, combined with his social isolation, created a dangerous cocktail of psychological vulnerabilities. As Ed grew older, his eccentricities became more pronounced. He developed an unhealthy fascination with death and anatomy, often reading pulp magazines filled with gruesome stories. This morbid interest, coupled with his distorted views on women, planted the seeds for his later crimes. The psychological impact of Ed Gein's upbringing cannot be overstated. His childhood was a breeding ground for instability, fueled by isolation, religious extremism, and a warped sense of reality. These formative years laid the foundation for the monster he would become. The year 1940 marked a significant turning point in Ed Gein's life, a year that would set the stage for the dark and twisted path he would eventually follow. It was the year his father, George, passed away. George's death, while not entirely unexpected, left a void in the Gein household. Although George's presence had been minimal due to his alcoholism and frequent absences, his death further isolated Ed and his brother Henry. The two brothers, already living in a remote farmhouse, found themselves even more cut off from the outside world. Now the brothers were left alone with their overbearing mother, Augusta. Her grip on their lives tightened, her influence becoming more suffocating with each passing day. Augusta was a deeply religious woman with strict and often harsh views, and she imposed these beliefs on her sons with an iron fist. Just 5 years later, in 1945, tragedy struck the Gein family once again. Henry died under mysterious circumstances while fighting a brush fire with Ed. The details of Henry's death were murky, and the incident raised many questions. Rumors of foul play circulated throughout the small town, with whispers suggesting that Ed might have been involved in his brother's death. However, no charges were ever filed against him, and the case remained unresolved. Henry's death devastated Ed, leaving him truly alone with his mother for the first time. The loss of his brother, combined with the isolation of their rural home, deepened Ed's sense of loneliness and despair. Augusta's health deteriorated rapidly after Henry's death. The once formidable woman became frail and bedridden, her physical decline mirroring the emotional decay within the household. Confined to her bed, she relied entirely on Ed for care. Ed, now her sole caretaker, was tasked with tending to her every need. This responsibility weighed heavily on him, as he struggled to balance his own emotional turmoil with the demands of caring for his ailing mother. He became her sole caretaker, tending to her every need and enduring her increasingly erratic behavior. Augusta's mental state deteriorated alongside her physical health, and her behavior became more unpredictable and demanding. This period intensified their already unhealthy dynamic, blurring the lines between love, dependence, and resentment. Ed's devotion to his mother was tinged with a deep-seated resentment, as he grappled with the conflicting emotions of duty and frustration. When Augusta finally died in 1945, Ed was completely unmoored. Her death left him without the one constant in his life, the person who had shaped his worldview and controlled his every move. He was consumed by grief and a profound sense of loss. The death of his mother left a gaping void in his life, one that he struggled to fill. However, his grief was intertwined with a twisted sense of liberation. For the first time, Ed was free from his mother's oppressive control, but this newfound freedom came at a terrible cost. He was finally free from his mother's control, but at a terrible cost. The loss of Augusta left Ed adrift, struggling to navigate a world without the domineering presence that had defined his existence. This period of profound loss and newfound freedom would ultimately lead Ed down a dark and twisted path, one that would shock and horrify the world in the years to come. Ed Gein retreated further into himself after his mother's death. Augusta Gein had been the dominant force in his life, and her passing left a void that Ed struggled to fill. He became increasingly isolated, withdrawing from the small community of Plainfield, Wisconsin, where he had lived his entire life. He boarded up the rooms she used, preserving them as shrines to her memory. These rooms remained untouched, frozen in time, while the rest of the house fell into disrepair. The once lively home became a mausoleum, a testament to Ed's inability to let go of the past. He supported himself with odd jobs, becoming a familiar but unsettling figure around Plainfield. Residents often saw him performing menial tasks, such as mowing lawns or repairing fences. Despite his odd behavior, many dismissed him as harmless, a lonely man struggling to cope with his grief. However, beneath the surface of his seemingly mundane existence, a dark obsession was taking root. Ed's fascination with death and the macabre grew, fueled by his isolation and the morbid curiosities he had developed over the years. He began to indulge in gruesome fantasies, which would soon manifest in horrifying ways. In November 1957, a local hardware store owner named Bernice Warden, disappeared. Her absence was immediately noticed, as she was a well-known and respected member of the community. The store, usually bustling with activity, was eerily quiet, and concern quickly spread among the townspeople. The last known person to see her alive was Ed Gein. He had been in the store the previous day purchasing antifreeze. This seemingly innocuous interaction would soon take on a sinister significance as the investigation unfolded. When police arrived at the Gein farmhouse to question him, they stumbled upon a scene of unimaginable horror. The officers, unprepared for what they were about to discover, were met with a sight that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The house was in disarray, littered with human bones and body parts. The stench of decay permeated the air, and the dimly lit rooms revealed a nightmarish collection of macabre artifacts. It was clear that Ed's obsession had spiraled out of control, leading him to commit unspeakable acts. Lampshades were fashioned from human skin, chairs were upholstered with it, and a belt made of human nipples hung on the wall. These grotesque items were meticulously crafted, a testament to Ed's twisted ingenuity and his descent into madness. Bernice Warden's decapitated body was found in the shed, hanging upside down and dressed in a skin suit. The gruesome discovery shocked the officers to their core, and the full extent of Ed's depravity began to emerge. It was a scene straight out of a horror movie, but tragically, it was all too real. The discovery of Ed Gein's crime sent shockwaves through Plainfield and beyond. The small, tight-knit community was rocked to its foundation, struggling to comprehend the monstrous acts committed by one of their own. The news spread quickly, and soon the entire nation was gripped by the horrifying details. The quiet community was thrust into the national spotlight, forever linked to the horrors unearthed at the Gein farm. The once peaceful town became synonymous with terror, as journalists and curious onlookers descended upon Plainfield, eager to learn more about the man behind the atrocities. The gruesome nature of his crimes and the fact that they were committed in such an ordinary setting tapped into primal fears and ignited a media frenzy. The story of Ed Gein became a cautionary tale, a reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, and that the line between sanity and madness is often perilously thin.